Hello everybody, welcome to Crafty Soup. My name is Misty. Today I'm here with the Iron Crafter Challenge, where we have a neglected item from our stash that we should put to use, and the challenge this time is to use stamps. Now this is not a neglected item in my stash, but there is one thing that I don't do very often, so I will share that and a few tips and tricks with you as we dive into this layout process. All right, so first up are my photos, and these were taken last year during a snow event that we had, which we don't get super often. So those are some fun photos of making some snow ice cream. I am using my counterfeit kit, and if you don't know what that is, I will link you up so you can see my kit build. And for that project, I made all of these embellishments using stamping. So if you want more ideas on stamping, I will link you up to this video so you can check that out as well. Now, the one thing that I mentioned that I don't do very often on my layouts is to use stamping for my titles. And despite having plenty of alphabet stamps, it is something that I just don't do very much. So I'm going to do that. And I've also pulled out a bunch of stamps that I used for making those embellishments. And we're going to do a range of stamping today on this layout. But before we can get to that, I do need to come up with a design plan. I have pre-pulled some papers from my counterfeit kit, and I'm going to mat these three photos in a straight line across the center of my layout, and I'm going to do a split layout design with one piece of pattern paper on the top and one piece down on the bottom. And I was trying to decide what I wanted to do. I definitely wanted a subtle pattern towards the bottom so that I can stamp over the top of it. I prefer stamping on a subtle pattern paper rather than plain paper because that just adds more detail to the stamping and it doesn't look quite as stark. So that is one of the tips that I use when I am working. All right, I have got a piece of paper chosen for the base and for that bottom layer. And now I'm moving my attention to my title. I am going to spell the word snow with stamping, and I'm going to mix and match my title with a phrase sticker as well. And I just wanted to share this one tip. If you have a word that actually requires the same letter twice, but you don't have more than one, go ahead and start spelling out your word. Move that letter to be a space holder, move it back to where it goes, clean your stamp off after you've stamped, and then you can kind of move that stamp back to its space holder, kind of realign the letters that were there, and then restamp just that one letter into its space. Hopefully all that made sense. I know I kind of covered it really fast, but since I'm not actually doing that on my layout, I just wanted to share that little tip before we move on. Now, another tip I have is to use a squishy mat underneath. And this is just a piece of foam that I've repurposed from a packaging. And I do stamp on some scratch paper first to make sure everything's right. Now my S was upside down, so I'm glad I did that first. But as a reminder, if you mess up your stamping, it is a great idea to stamp on a separate piece like this, that if it goes wrong, you can cut off the bad part, throw it away, and start all over again. So if you're newer to stamping on layouts, that is definitely what I recommend doing. All right, off camera, I've done a little bit other work. I did use a border punch on my bottom piece of paper, and because it is very tone on tone here, I do want to add some contrast with this other piece of pattern paper, which I don't have enough to span the whole width. So I'm just going to cut little strips and kind of stick them back together. And because it's a wood grain, nobody will really notice the splits the seams coming back together. And I do want to carry that paper up to the top where my title is. Notice I did finish off my title phrase with a little fishtail banner cut at the bottom there, and I have got that sticker mixed and matched with my stamping. And part of the reason why I don't stamp as much is that I do find it a little annoying to line up all the stamps, but also I like the dimension of, thicker type stickers for my alphabets. But if you mix and match stamping with the more dimensional elements, you can still get a nice title without it feeling too flat. So I have moved on to other areas of stamping, and what I really like to do when I am going to do stamping on my layout is place the physical stamps on my page so that I can get a real sense of how these things are all going to fit together. Now, I have other embellishments that I want to nestle in with these, so I am going to go ahead and choose those now and try and get their spacing ideas in mind so that when I do go to do my stamping, I have a better idea about how everything's going to fit. And in this case, I decided I wanted to add some stamping on top of some of these other elements. So that is good to have everything ready to go before you start stamping. Now here with this little stamping scene, I am doing what's called second gen stamping, where you stamp a first image and then don't clean your stamp at all and go ahead and stamp a second image. Depending on your stamps and your ink, that will be more or less effective, but the second gen should give you just a lighter tone of stamping if you have a good quality ink and a good quality stamp, to give you more depth and dimension to your little stamping. The other thing I'm doing here is kind of creating some movement to my stamping, and that is very easily accomplished with these kind of little wind burst stamps that I have. But if you don't have something that has that natural movement to it, just start spreading your stamping across as you're going, and then you do want to connect that stamping up later so that it's not just kind of randomness on your page. But you can do that with little embellishments here and there in between, which you kind of see me playing with here, but you'll see a little bit more of that as I move towards the end. So I have a little tiny bunny embellishment that I made with stamping, and I'm adding this little bird and a gold flower, and you can see how I'm kind of trying to connect all of these pieces together to create a cohesive cluster. And this happens to be a scene, but you can do it with other general shapes of stamps like florals and whatnot, and create a cluster. It doesn't have to be a specific little scene like I'm doing. All right, so I've got my stamping in that left corner, in that top corner, and because I'm going to be putting my journaling in this bottom right corner, I don't think I'm going to do any stamping there. So I've got stamping in my title and those two cluster areas. Usually I like to try and add similar elements to every section. Oh, like here I'm adding another little red bird up there because there's red in each cluster. I wanted to carry those pieces over to each one. So that red bird up there in the top helps tie it all together. Now I'm back and I do have my journaling on there. So that journaling actually is adding some of that blackness from my stamping ink to that other cluster. And so that helps tie everything together, and I don't feel the need to do stamping in that bottom cluster. All right, I have finished off with a few embellishments, and really that's going to wrap it up for me for this time. I hope that I shared some tips with you on how to add stamping to your layouts that maybe you didn't already know. And if you need more ideas, of course, this is a hop, so there are plenty of people on the list here that can share their tips with you, and I will watch them too so that maybe I can pick up a few new ideas. I will be back next week with more videos for you, so I hope you will join me then. And until then, have an artful day.